Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And Chodesh Tov, Rosh Chodesh started this morning. Got a lot going on. When I was in college, I was introduced to an activity that was meant to encourage team building, leadership, and engineering. And this activity is known as the Marshmallow Challenge. The way it works is typically like a class or a workshop. Is it divided into groups, and there's about 3 or 4 people in each group, and they are given the following supplies. The first thing they get, 20 sticks of raw, hard spaghetti. Okay? Then they get 1 yard of string, 1 yard of masking tape, and 1 marshmallow. And the challenge is they have to build the tallest freestanding tower that they can, and they have to do it in 18 minutes. And it has to hold the weight of the marshmallow on top. Now, this sounds pretty easy, but after having done it, I can tell you this is harder than it sounds because it forces people to collaborate very quickly. I have done this exercise many times since I learned about it in college, and I've done it mainly with students in different religious schools that I've worked with, but I've also done it at retreat weekends with adults. And I can tell you that based off of my observations, almost always the younger the group that's doing this, the taller the tower that they build. This is very interesting. I'm not exaggerating. I've done the same activity with kindergartners and the same activity with adults, some of whom are CEOs, business people. Occasionally you get the engineering group. And the kindergartners or the first graders or second graders totally mop the floor with the older group. Now, I guess the question that we should ask ourselves is, why is that the case? And I have some ideas, but first let me walk you through how this activity usually goes with the older crowd. The first part of the activity is the group orients themselves to the task. They hear the instructions, and then they talk about what the structure could look like, and then they assign leadership roles. Then they plan some different designs, they assemble the sticks on the table, and start to make a structure, okay? But then as the time starts to run out, towards the end, they just place their marshmallow on top and hope and pray that it holds. And if it does, there is a sigh of relief. But usually it doesn't hold, and the tower wilts or crashes, and then there's absolute panic, and everyone scrambles to try anything to solve it. People are working over each other instead of with each other. It is a huge mess. I should also mention that while they're building, I'm walking around the room, talking to different groups, and I try to give them advice on what works and what doesn't work. After all, I've supervised and done this activity many, many times. And I can tell you that when I do this with the adult groups, almost always they totally ignore my advice. They don't use the materials I tell them to use. They ignore how I tell them to place the tower. And these are the groups that usually can't get their structure to hold their marshmallow at all in the end. When I do this activity with children, they go about the entire exercise a completely different way. Almost always, they produce a taller and more interesting structure than their adult counterparts. Because rather than thinking of a plan, executing the plan, and hoping it works, the kids will take the marshmallow and immediately begin playing with it, and playing with different ideas and different prototypes to make it work. And they constantly refine their towers as they fall and as they crash. They build, they tweak, and rebuild, and they use their entire time making. And notably, the two things they do differently, Number one, they don't jockey for power. Nobody tries to become the CEO of Spaghetti Incorporated while they're doing this. They just do it. And secondly, this is the most important, always they take my advice when I give it to them. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Noach, contains some of the most famous stories from the Hebrew Bible. Noah's Ark, of course, and then the Tower of Babel. Both of these stories involve construction. One is a large boat, and the other is a tall, tower. I think the lessons given to us at the beginning of the Torah are more universal than the lessons closer to the end of this holy book. But these two very different building projects contain important messages for all of us. The first construction project we're told about is Noah building the ark, and the whole point of this story is that it's successful. We're told that because of this boat that Noah made, it saved the earth's animals and kept Noah and his family safe during the punishing flood which God destroyed the rest of humanity. Now, the second construction project we're told about happens about 340 years later than Noah's Ark, and it's called the Tower of Babel. It's built by the residents of Babylon who wanted to climb to heaven and wage war against God. Now, this project, we're told, was a complete failure, leading to the widespread dispersion of everyone involved. So the question remains, why was Noah's endeavor a success while the builders of the tower completely failed? I think the simple answer is that Noah is working for God, while the builders of the tower were working against God. The text of the Torah tells us that, quote, Noah did everything God commanded him. Now, if we juxtapose that to the Tower of Babel, where the Torah says, quote, God descended to see the city and tower which the sons of man built, we get a very, very powerful lesson. You see, friends, when we work to come closer to God, in my experience, we almost always succeed. When we listen to God's advice, when we try to adhere to the faith our ancestors who were given commandments and advice to navigate life, when we act out of love and when we cooperate with others, we almost always succeed. This is similar to the kindergartners building their towers. They take advice, build, fall, get back up, and rebuild. However, when we work to oppose God, universally, we almost always fail. You can see this with people who are rich and powerful. They might have means, they might have money, but oftentimes they can be just miserable. They try to build, but just like the adults in the marshmallow challenge, they refuse to heed advice. They put all of their hopes and dreams and endeavors they have into just building themselves up. And the result is oftentimes a big, big crash. So friends, my prayer for us tonight is that we may all find great success, not by worshiping humans or by worshiping ourselves, but by worshiping the Creator of all humanity. I'll leave you with a quote. Life is like a marshmallow, easy to chew, but sometimes hard to swallow. Shabbat Shalom.